The Hilton sale is on. Now through September 29th, you can save up to 20% on stays this fall and beyond. Long weekends, last-minute getaways, holiday gatherings. There's a Hilton stay for all of them. More moments, more experiences, more destinations. Now 20% off for a limited time because it matters where you stay. Don't wait. Book by September 29th and save up to 20% at Hilton.com. Terms apply. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
As a sports fan, I have to confess. Sometimes the game gets kind of boring. That's when I unfold my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7 and use multi-window viewing on its large screen. Boring game? I'm checking out my fantasy baseball league at the same time. Score still 1-0? I'm replying to emails in the other window, scoring points with the boss. Semifinals finally getting exciting? I'm buying tickets to the finals and booking my flights. Can your phone do that?
The new Galaxy Z Fold 7. Get yours at Samsung.com.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire, channeling his inner whispering Bob Harris.
I felt it was a bit more Jason King.
Did you?
Sort of a little bit.
Okay, no, that's all right. We all have different interpretations of how we look to the outside world, and both of them are references that. Well, let's be fair. Most of our audience will get most of our. I keep talking about our demographic as though it's going over the head of 17-year-olds, Kieran, but it's not going over the head of most of our audience, is it?
No.
It's apart from Chipper, Kieran, how are you on this Sunday evening?
I'm very good. I've been marking exams since 7 o'clock in the morning, which is, in theory, a bit of a downer at the weekend, but. I was enlightened by one of my students making reference to global warming as a sustainability issue. I'm going. I'm sure I don't sound like that when I pronounce it, but yeah, that's what he or she. To be fair, it's all anonymised. Has written that particular phrase, which is new to me.
Yeah, he or she or Chat GPT, Kieran.
Yes,
unfortunately,
harsh but fair.
Yeah. Questions day, Kieran. I can't resist saying this. Question number one is, I don't know. Have you seen the league table at all?
I have indeed. Congratulations. Yes, Champions League place.
Well, we were till Bournemouth spoiled it by them.
Well, no, because I still think 5 will go through.
Oh, well, there you are, Champions League then.
Yeah.
Well, except you know what will happen? New York Jets will somehow qualify for the Champions League and we'll end up being kicked out of it. We've got some great questions today, Kieran. It's really interesting that they are, the first 4 at least, are about PSR, which indicates... Well, it indicates to me, Kieran, because each question is very different. It just indicates how important PSR is to the average football fan, or certainly to the average listener of this show. Not that there is an average listener of this show, Kieran. I mean,
they're all above average.
There might be a mean, I don't know, because I always get in trouble because there's 3 sorts of average. There might be a mean listener to this. What's everyone norm, isn't it?
There's mean, mode, and median.
Mode. Oh, that's changed since I was doing statistics then. That's probably why I'm getting all these questions wrong in the pub, Kieran. It also shows how complex PSR is. That even close to 6 years into the pod, Kieran, we've been discussing it since then, and we very rarely get the same question twice. So it's. I don't know if that's a good thing, if that indicates that PSR is good, or it indicates that it could be a lot simpler.
Well, it certainly could be a lot simpler. The trouble is, if it is very simple, then it's very simple to circumvent.
Yes, that's very true. So Marcus Makin has our first question on PSR. And Marcus says, with PSR rules focusing on clubs being able to book the sale of players who have come through their youth system as pure profit. Is it likely that we'll see the end of the one club player? I mean, I think they're rarer and rarer, Kim, but I just want to, I'd be interested to say when Marcus says that PSR rules focus on clubs being able to book the sale of players who have come through the youth system. Would you agree with that it is a focus of PSR?
I think it is seen as a solution to a PSR problem for individual clubs, in the sense that if they get to the end of April, the end of May, and they're still at a PSR deficit, you've got to generate some profits from somewhere. If you're trying to sell a player that you've bought yourself, they will have a book value, which could be significant. So therefore, you might only make a small profit. If you have one of those players that has some first team experience, even if it's just in the Carabao Cup, especially if you can if you are a player from an elite club, so therefore they come as a premium. The youth team players of the likes of Chelsea and Manchester City in particular, and Liverpool, I think you could argue there as well, are seen as being developed in a particular style, and that enhances their value, and that allows those clubs to sell the players and generate those profits pre the 30th of June. We've also seen it elsewhere. I think Newcastle were sad to see some of their players like Elliot Anderson. I think he came through the youth team. He'd broken into the first team. So I think if you are one of those players that say perhaps a first or second year pro who is getting first team exposure, then your market value is likely to be in the low tens of millions, and that becomes low tens of millions of profit. That can be a real game changer from a PSR point of view. If you are, I don't know what the appropriate word is, I'm going to use the word gem. Are Manchester City going to get rid of Phil Foden? Are Arsenal going to get rid of Bukayo Saka? These are absolutely brilliant footballers. I can't see any incentive for the clubs to sell those players because it's going to cost them a fortune to replace players of that calibre. So I think we will see potentially fewer clubs having one club players unless they have come through and they've immediately established themselves as being a first team, not only regular, but a first team elite player.
I wonder sometimes, Kieran, I don't know how old Marcus is, for example, but I would argue that certainly in recent decades, the one club player is relatively rare anyway. I've been trying to think about players for Palace who are, and either we got them somewhere else when they were young and they played most of their career with us, or we got them as for our ranks and then they went somewhere else at the end of their career. So there's very few that I can think of that actually played every single game for Palace. And I would argue that, I think it was in 1963 when the court case, I can't remember the name of the player, wanted to go from Newcastle to Arsenal when the old retain contracts. So when the minimum wage went out in 61, I think it was, and then until 1963, and this player took the FA to court because until then, clubs could hold a contract, and even if the contract expired, if they didn't want you to go, you stayed. Anyway, was it George Easton? It might be. But I would argue that probably before then, certainly in the 30s, 40s and 50s, I mean, players like Tom Finney, for example, top players. But I would say it's probably been relatively rare for a longer time than we would like to think.
Yes, you can't... sometimes you associate players with one club, but think about Steven Gerrard. He went to play at the end of his career overseas, and so on. There have been a few, being Paul Scholes, for example, at Manchester United, Ryan Giggs, but they were, I think, a gem find in terms of the quality of the players, and they decided that they didn't want to go elsewhere, and they certainly could have gone to play in continental Europe should they so desired. It is a relatively rare feature. I mean, I was racking my head. Again, at Brighton, they've got Lewis Dunk and Solly March. But apart from that, and you could argue that even so, Dunk went out on loan. Does that mean that you're still a one club player? I'm not exactly sure what the rules are under those circumstances, because David Beckham went on loan to Preston, but everybody thinks of him as being a Manchester United player and so on.
Yeah, in the old days for Palace, he was into their career at Orient for some reason. I don't know whether there was an agreement between the clubs, but it certainly seemed with so many players that even legends like John Jackson, who went to Orient in the end. Our next question, Kieran, comes from Nick Zepanik. And I'm pretty sure that's correct, because I think Nick has sent us a question before, and he put the pronunciation in brackets. He's obviously got a higher impression of my memory than is actually the case. So if people are asking questions again, feel free to put the pronunciation. I probably said this at the time, but if you can have names in Scrabble, Nick would be winning every tournament he was taking part in. Nick says, and I think this is a very interesting question, actually. We keep hearing that selling academy players represents pure profit to clubs because they, in inverted commas, cost nothing. But if a player's been a club since the age of 7, then by the time they are sold, there must have been a considerable investment in terms of coaching, feeding, education, transport to away games, and wages, not to mention an admittedly small percentage of the general running costs of an academy. So roughly how much does it cost, for example, for a 19-year-old to go all the way through from the academy to the first team? I think that's a very interesting question. Also, every now and again, Kieran, when you see it written down, a player's been at a club since the age of 7, a tiny little shudder goes across you somehow. It seems odd. You take these things for granted, but as we said before, these are kids, aren't they? But it's a great question, because we talk about them costing nothing, but it costs a lot. It's the same as raising a kid in the same way in your own house.
Exactly. If I showed prospective parents this is how much it's going to cost you to raise your child income statement and balance sheet, fertility rates would drop.
Are you suggesting, Kieran, that the Catholic Church could use one of your spreadsheets as a potential legal
alternative
contraceptive? Have you seen, before you lock that door, have a look at this spreadsheet? This might make you think twice. Or I'll tell you what doesn't make you think twice: having a picture of the Pope over your bedroom. That was
yes.
There's a young girl called Bernadette. I'll call her Bernadette for legal reasons. Her name wasn't Bernadette, but having a giant picture of the Pope over her bed it worked. It was very, very effective contraceptive, I have to say. Unless, of course, you are differently inclined and you found the Pope at the time very attractive. Who knows? Yeah,
exactly.
In these,
if we take a look at the cost of an academy. If you are a Category 1 academy, that's going to cost you in a minimum of £5 million per season. And I would suspect that would be the case for a club in the Championship. I don't think there's any Category 1 academies in League One, simply because they are very high, very expensive to maintain. But it could go as high as 20, perhaps £25 million for some of the clubs. They don't tend to show the figures, with the one exception of Aston Villa. And I think in their most recent accounts, they said the cost of running our academy is £18 million a season. And of course, that is deductible from PSR. It's an investment, but it's a bit like being a pharmaceutical company in one way, in the sense that if I go to an organisation such as AstraZeneca, they will presently be working on perhaps 100 different drugs, of which one is going to be commercially successful. And that's the same way that the academy works. So the reason why you don't see those academy costs going into the balance sheet in respect of individual players is that it's actually very, very difficult to work out at the start of the process, when this child of 7, 8, 9, whatever it's going to be, comes to the academy, which of these are going to be the successful ones and which ones are not. So therefore, you simply just write off those costs as they are incurred. But if we then start to look at things in more detail, that investment, Some clubs, such as certainly Manchester City, I believe Manchester United are starting to go down this route as well, are providing for their scholars schooling. They want, and that the benefit to the club, and the argument goes, is that by having a child attend a school, and especially if there's a group of them, they start to form a bond, which can be beneficial in terms of them transitioning, doing their perhaps 2 nights a week, 3 nights a week, whatever it's going to be. At the club academy, I know Phil Foden went to St Bede's in Manchester. The annual fees there around about £17,000 a year. It is a very good school. If you take a look at the results, the results for the players who've gone through, or should we say the academy children that have gone through, they get decent GCSE results. I think Manchester United are trying to do something similar with Manchester Grammar School, for example, and so on. When that player reaches 15, I think they can sort of move on to around about £350 a week maximum in terms of sort of a scholar fee. And then they can sign a sort of a contract at the age of 17. They can't sign more than a 2-year contract. I know Jurgen Klopp, for example, he was very keen for these children, these young men, let's be honest, to be grounded. So I think Liverpool had a policy of, we're not going to pay you more than £40,000 a year. Now, if you were getting first team exposure, you get bonuses on top of that. But this was to try to sort of instill discipline as far as these youngsters were concerned, and also to keep them focused on the football, because at the age of 16, I was an idiot. And if somebody had given me £5,000 a week, £10,000 a week, I would have wasted it, and I would have had every single, and I came pretty close to it anyway, I would have had every single Sinclair Spectrum game going, for example, and my stamp collection would have gone off the scale, and that would have distracted me from football. So therefore, the clubs tend to. I've not changed much since, have I?
I was going to say your Sinclair Spectrum and your stamp collection might distract you from football, Kieran, but from accounting, they're the perfect supplement. Yes. I should think if your accounting manager would be saying, no, you play as many Sinclair Spectrum games as you want. You collect as many stamp hinges and upside-down Honolulu first editions as you want, young man. That will help you in your accounting academy career.
That sounds fair enough. If we take a look at the cost of therefore running an academy, I would say that from the age of 15, perhaps you've probably narrowed it down at a club to 30 per year group, and you might have that for 5 or 6 years. If it's costing, let's take the Villa figure of £18 million a year. You spread that over the number of kids involved, and it's probably working out at around about 100 to 120k per year per academy child from the age of 15 to sort of 19, 21, and so on. From the age of 7 to 15, you are still a child, and you are getting limited amount of time. So if you take a look at that, let's say 120k a year, let's say that you're going to be on, you're still on a sort of a young contract. You've got 40,000. It could easily cost a club until a player is 20 to 21. £400,000 to £500,000 in development fees, and in terms of wages, £40,000 a year for the first couple of years. You'd expect that to go up at the Premier League a wee bit. It's going to cost you perhaps another £400,000 to the age of 21, and then a decision will be made. So I think there's the thick end of £800,000 to £1 million a year by the time that child becomes a young adult at the age of 21. And then if you're not going to make it at Manchester United or Liverpool or City or Chelsea, wherever it's going to be, Arsenal and so on, then the chances are somebody will have had a word with you and you say, you've been out on loan, and you move on. So therefore they will be looking to recover that money, and the sums involved are very, very significant. Young Hall went from Chelsea to Newcastle, 20, 25 million first out on year loan. So the clubs are confident that, yes, it might be costing them the thick end of £1 million to develop a player to the age of 21. But if they get that far, then I think the clubs would be, at the Premier League level, would be confident of recouping that money and much more.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
This episode is sponsored by Shopify. When we started The Price of Football and things started to take off, it all got a bit overwhelming at times as we were suddenly sorting out recordings, interviews, live shows, and our online store. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify.
Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. With Shopify, you get your own design studio that includes hundreds of ready-to-use templates. You can accelerate your content creation with Shopify's AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. And you can easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify.
Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for a £1 per month trial period at shopify.co.uk/priceoffootball, all lowercase. So go to shopify.co.uk/priceoffootball to take your business to the next level today. That's shopify.co.uk/priceoffootball. The notion of educating players, Kieran, is one for a different pod. But obviously, clubs are legally obliged to supplement the education of kids until the age of 16. But it seems to me that every penny a club spends on a player's education, I think Man City's approach is a splendid one, the fact they're educating them at proper academies, because it can only help the individual, the kid, the rest of his life anyway. It makes him a better footballer, I think, because it makes him a better human being. Plus, it gives him more of a chance if the football career doesn't work out, doesn't it? So any money spent on that, which for a Premier League club is going to be relatively small, is the right thing to do, is it not?
Yes, and also the clubs are fully aware that they're operating in a competitive market. So you've not only got to do what's best for the child, you've also got to sell the project to the parent. And if I had a child who was a gifted young athlete, me coming from my background, which is educational background, education would be a priority for me. You would extol the virtues. But remember, if you're talking to kids, especially adolescent kids, they're the last person you listen to. So trying to get the clubs to persuade. And I've also spoken to some clubs and some academy managers, and it was interesting conversation in the sense that their argument is that their jobs are on the line in terms of the quality of the players that they produce, not on the number of GCSEs. So they say, yeah, we'd like them to get a good education, but ultimately I'm here to develop them as a professional footballer, and that is secondary. Now, if that is the culture of the club, if that is the culture of the management of the club, that you are nothing more than a profit centre and these kids are nothing more than inventory, what message is that sending out to these young people? At the same time, I've been really impressed by the number of young English professional players, it's noticeably the young ones who these days are so keen and so willing to try their chances overseas and develop themselves from a language and a culture point of view. And I think that is very encouraging. But the system is far from perfect.
Well, the trouble is, Kieran, as we found when writing that book, The Price of Football book, Unfit and Improper Persons, we have spoken to people at academies at very different levels, at different parts of the country, who increasingly say that the people running the academies, that they are judged on the amount of money they make from the sale of those players. They're judged on the profit. That's how they keep their jobs, unfortunately. The trouble is, understandably, that they won't come on and talk about that to us in public, because they don't want people to realise that. And it's not every academy, it has to be said. But, some academies, all academies are run well. They're run properly. They're run within the rules and the guidelines. But some have a different attitude to the welfare of the young players at the end of their time with them than others. And increasingly, I think there'll come a time in 10 years where all of them are profit centres, as you say. This idea that you're going to uncover a gem is what people like Gary Neville's phrase, they always uncover a gem. That increasingly isn't going to happen. Basically, essentially, a Premier League club will hoover up every single young kid, in male and female, in their area, in the basis that you throw enough mud against the wall, some of it's going to stick. Unfortunately, that seems to be how it's happened. The days of Man United sending scouts to Northern Ireland, in the hope that they'll pick up another George Best, are way behind us, aren't they?
That's right. And also, if you take a look at some of the algorithmic organisations, that they have their own sort of academies which are operating in international markets, and they are spotting players that the clubs don't, and then they are using again young people as a means of making money. And look, there's nothing wrong with making money, so long as it's as the young person does not become a byproduct to this. And also, I've spoken. I'm fortunate enough that I teach for the Professional Footballers Association, and I get to go to schools on occasion to talk about football finance, because it's got the word football in. And the word football, as I found, the word football opens so many doors at so many different levels. If you talk to somebody in an academy, they're not stupid kids, and they will quite often come up to you and say, "Look, I know that in my year group and the year above and perhaps the year below, of those 3 years, the chances are that one or two of us might become a professional footballer. So therefore, I'm competing against everybody in my year and everybody in the year above and everybody in the year below. And therefore, I have to do nothing else but concentrate on my football." And as a consequence of that, education becomes secondary. Developing yourself as a young person in terms of just doing the daft things that we used to do as kids. They are so disciplined, so many of them, that they lose their peer groups, they lose their education. And if they are in that 99% who don't go on to be professional footballers, then all of a sudden there's a void, and it's a big gap to have to make up. And the football clubs, it's not their responsibility as far as they see it. And I'm not being critical of the football clubs here. They say, well, we wish you well, keep in touch, we'll give you a reference, or as any former employer would. But you're not responsible for that person's welfare.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Kieran, as we're seeing, one of the things that youngsters are not being taught properly yet, it will happen through your good offices and the PFA's good offices, is about their money, how to look after their money. As we saw from that documentary 2 weeks ago, when a slew of professional footballers lost an awful lot of money and now owe an awful lot of money to HMRC off the back of it. And this is my opportunity to say they're having one or two people, Kieran, who asked why we didn't look into that documentary and in more detail, but we didn't really think it was appropriate. So the documentary covered everything, and without talking to the individuals again, which we didn't really want to do. We didn't think there was anything in it for us to sort of rake over the old coals. But it does prove, I think every single one of the players has since said, I knew nothing about money. So when these people come along and say to me, don't you worry about that, I'll sort this out. You're going to end your career with loads of money in the bank. It's all sorted with HMRC. And then suddenly they find that neither of those things are true. And perhaps if all of them did have more basic groundwork in simple finance, they could avoid scams like that, couldn't they?
Yes. I have been in contact with one of the people involved in the show, so I'm having tentative discussions, and we might revisit that story.
Well, that would be good if that individual, I didn't know that, Kieran, but if that individual is happy to talk about it, because I think it's something that I know you've been passionate about from the start, and through you, I've grown to have the same passion about. Again, the more you can educate young people at football clubs about everything in life, the better it is for them further down the line, remembering that these are people whose careers end at the age of 34. When most other people's careers are just getting into the swing of things, these people's careers are over. So they need, there will be a lot of people listening reaching for the small violins at this case, Kieran, but they are human beings and they need help with the rest of their life when football's not in it, basically. Paul Stokes has a question, which I think is a fascinating one, Kieran, about PSR. It actually made me laugh, first of all, because I thought it was a bit of a cheeky one, but I think it's a very good question. Paul says, are there, presumably, I'll start that again, Paul, because let's get it right. I'm overexcited about asking the question, Paul, you see. Are the presumably substantial legal costs of contesting an alleged breach of PSR rules included in that season's costs for the PSR FFP submission? Can you claim, it cost us £8 million to get Nick DeMarco to defend us in court? Can we offset that against FFP, PSR? But also the second part of the question is just as interesting. Are there any costs that the typical football fan would be surprised to discover either are or aren't included in PSR calculations?
Right, Paul. I've been looking at the Premier League handbook this afternoon, and that was actually quite good because the alternative was watching Bournemouth versus Newcastle. And I think I got the good part of the deal.
Yeah, I went for Sunderland versus Villa, which wasn't that much better, but it did have a lovely 1970s kick in the testicles, followed by a red card, which is a lovely little throwback, and a player looking astonished that he'd been caught kicking the player while the captain whispers VAR. There's a camera every 2 yards, you idiot. Sunderland, I'll tell you what, Kieran, I think this could be the season when all three clubs have got a fair chance of staying up. I did not think that the week before kickoff. I really didn't.
Yeah, they all started very well, and fair play to them. Substantial investment by all three clubs as well in terms of new talent.
Yeah.
So good luck to them. So as far as Paul's question is concerned, I have been looking at the Premier League handbook, and it says effectively you start off with your profit before tax, and explicitly you adjust for infrastructure, youth development, women and community schemes. So on the face of it, that would appear that your legal costs in relation to a PSR claim would not be exempt from PSR itself, which intuitively seems wrong because you end up with double jeopardy. And what we mean by double jeopardy is effectively being found guilty of the same offence twice. It could be that under those circumstances, your PSR legal costs put you in breach of the next year's PSR figures, and that just seems to be absolutely crazy. What I suspect would be the case is that the legal costs could be picked up by another company within the group in order to prevent that, or that there are nuances that exist within the Premier League rulebook and the EFL rulebook that I've not picked up on, and this is just deemed to be a non-footballing cost and therefore is deemed to be exempt. It's outside the usual nature of transactions. So to give a couple of examples of that, we had Manchester United Manchester United PLC paying £35 million to the Rain Group and other advisors when selling 27% of the club to Jim Ratcliffe. And that has not been included in the PSR calculations. Part of the reason for that is that those costs were incurred by New York, and it was the English version of Manchester United's accounts that gets submitted to the Premier League. So it's only the New York office that's effectively incurred those, so it's been exempt. If we take a look at Chelsea's accounts for 21-22, there was a £49.75 million payment to, and it says here, Coyley says, former directors. I think that's Marina Graviskaya and Bruce Buck, which were incurred by the parent company in advising, presumably the UK government, and advising Roman Abramovich to sell the club to Blueco, Todd Bowley, Clearlake, and so. So I think those costs would have been exempt as well. So that's where we are, because the Manchester City legal costs are going to be fairly stratospheric. I think there'll be tens and tens of millions of pounds, given the amount that the Premier League tried to claim against Everton. I think Everton put in an appeal when the Premier League tried to recover its costs for the PSR calculations there. And they were only about £5 million. And it was a very, very narrow, very, very short case. So that's where I think we are. In terms of costs that your typical fan will be surprised that are or aren't included in this sort of thing, I don't think there's any other surprises. I know that there were question marks again looking at Manchester United, that they were still claiming for COVID, I think in season 22-23, but they were saying that was linked to their Chinese megastores, and there were still quite significant restrictions in China later than they were in continental Europe and the States and so on.
Hold that Man City thought in your head, Kieran, because it's something that's just occurred to me. Just in terms of the Premier League handbook, because it's been a while, Kieran, I have to say. I used to dabble occasionally, but yes. In terms of, are there any further definitions of infrastructure and community costs, for example? So, because community cost seems to me a fairly broad one. If you wanted to bung some nefarious claims in there for work done in the community, I mean, infrastructure, I presume. Anything done on the ground or in the ground, you could probably claim, but community costs in particular seems to be one that would need defining.
Yes, I think what will happen here is, and this is a sad indictment of the game we love, that the Premier League will audit any of the figures which it considers to be inconsistent with those of other clubs. So there will be some checking taking place. You've got to be very careful about this. I'm certainly aware, looking at those particular issues. I think I've said this before. I know a youth development manager for a Category 1 academy, and he gets to spend 1/3 of his actual budget on academy players, and the other stuff gets siphoned through. And I think the problem for the Premier League and the EFL, when they are auditing these things, they've got a limited amount of time to do that. They are up against clubs. If the culture of the club is to try to circumvent rules, it's actually quite difficult when somebody's trying to pull a fast one. So it is tricky. You've just got to hope that the senior management and the club executives are people that have a moral and ethical fibre running through the seam, but that's not always the case.
No, just briefly, Kieran, on Man City. I was watching the start of the Arsenal-Man City game this afternoon, taking in the earth-shattering knowledge that for each of those teams, 5 games in, to lose today would be a disaster. that neither of them could possibly win the Premier League should they not win that game today. And I was stroking my chin thinking I didn't realise it was such an important game this stage of the season. But no, Sky have really sold me on this. I may have gone on to do something else, but I'm actually going to have to watch this, what turned out to be a rather dull game, I have to say, till the end. But what was interesting, they were talking about how the two clubs don't like each other recently. There have been various incidents. But also the commentator, Peter Drury, I think it was, said, and of course, the 115 charges from Man City from the Premier League, all driven by Arsenal. The Arsenal board, which hasn't helped relations between the clubs. Now, I didn't think, I mean, it's the sort of thing you hear talked about and hinted, but I didn't think it was the sort of thing that was that clearly in the public domain, because you think if it was, it's no wonder Man City don't like Arsenal at the time. Is there? I mean, briefly, would you say that's basically true, that the Premier League are being driven by Arsenal in this?
I think to hold Arsenal solely responsible is not correct. There is certainly a perception in, should we say, WhatsApp groups and gossips that I get involved in, where I tend to be the listener. I'm quite fortunate that I get to have conversations with quite a few people in the business side of the game and the media side of the game, where normally they will be saying to me, "Can you summarise, this company's accounts has happened, or this has happened at a particular club?" So yes, absolutely, that's my part of my public engagement role at the university. But in return, you get snippets, because we all like gossip, and clearly that has to be kept quiet in terms of sources and so on. But I can assure you that there is a perception that Arsenal in particular feel very hard done to by certain aspects of Manchester City's success. And there has been some resentment. Now, that may all have changed because the composition of the Arsenal board of directors has changed over the course of the last 3 to 4 days. So people may have left who sort of were quite hostile to Manchester City. But yes, I mean, from my sources in Manchester, there is a feeling that Arsenal in particular were gunning for them, and I shouldn't have used that phrase. It sounds very cliched. And they were pressurising the Premier League as far as the 115 charges are concerned. I'm certainly aware, and this is from actual conversations I've had, that there are other clubs in the Premier League who do not see Manchester City as a rival stroke threat, i.e., the clubs at our level. Manchester City, whether Manchester City finish first in the Premier League or second in the Premier League or third in the Premier League, let's be honest, it doesn't really make any difference to Palace or Brighton or Bournemouth or Wolves or Leicester or Leeds and so on, because our ambition is to try to achieve something else. And therefore, I think it could be argued that the focus on the middle class clubs, for want of a better phrase, is how much is this going to cost us? Is it genuinely, are they, now that these legal fees are going up and up and up? And if you take a look at the Premier League accounts for the most recent year, which is the year end, I think it's the 31st of July 2024, it's noticeable that there was a £60 million increase in what the Premier League blandly call other costs. Now, I'm thinking, well, what are they likely to be? I would imagine that legal costs are likely to take up a serious element of that. So therefore, I think that the clubs at our level, and I'm not denigrating Palace or Brighton or Wolves, we're not the big six. I think those clubs in particular are concerned, if there's £100 million worth of cost, that's going to cost us £5 million each. And we're going to get nothing from it. Whereas if I was Arsenal or some of the other elite clubs, if the Premier League's charges are proven to be successful, they're going to be straight in saying, well, we've suffered. And remember, we were discussing on the news show last week about Burnley's case against Everton, where it's the loss of a chance. So, we would have won the Premier League, we would have won this, we would have qualified for the Champions League. This is the percentage basis across these years, and all of a sudden there could be some very significant compensation claims coming in. So I think part of it is personal, that there are people at clubs that don't seem to like each other, and part of it's just business.
At Talus, we know cybersecurity can be tough and you can't protect everything, but with Talus, you can secure what matters most. With Talus industry-leading platforms, you can protect critical applications, data, and identities anywhere and at scale with the highest ROI. That's why the most trusted brands and largest banks, retailers, and healthcare companies in the world rely on Talus to protect what matters most: applications, data, and identities. That's Talus, T-H-A-L-E-S. Learn more at talusgroup.com/cyber.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. Start converting your B2B audience today. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started today at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
I'll have you know, Kieran, that some of us work in industries where gossip and tittle-tattle is of no interest. We prefer to get on with our lives rather than listening to scurrilous rumours. And when WhatsApp groups start speculating as to what comedians might be taking money from the Saudi Arabian government, most of us go, no, it's not. It's none of our business. It's really none of that. What the Omid? What you think? Jimmy Carr? I mean, Jimmy Carr wasn't surprised. Jimmy Carr would do 15-minute warm-up act for Putin's "We've Conquered Kiev" party. So that wasn't a surprise to anyone. But it's some. So no, the gossip and scurrilous rumour with no interest to talk in. Our last question on PSR before two more other good questions comes from Russell Gowers, and I think Russell Gowers and I would get on based on his introductory sentence. As Russell says, I think I've figured out what Chelsea are up to in terms of their transfer policy, and I want to see if it stands to reason or if I'm a total idiot. That's pretty much the spectrum on which I operate, Russell, basically. I'm either always spectacularly right or I very rarely get things half right, basically. So my breath is baited for you, Russell. Let's put it this way. Although I suspect from how Russell words this, he probably won't lose any sleep either way, Kieran.
True.
He'll probably be the first one in the pub to say, no, it turns out I'm an idiot. This season, says Russell, with the new PSR regulations shifting the emphasis from profit to turnover, it's now much more important for clubs to maximise their revenue as opposed to minimise their losses in order to have the biggest possible wage budget. By taking the current Pokemon approach to transfers, Chelsea are in effect stockpiling those players so they can sell them as soon as they need to hype their revenue. They can rinse and repeat for however many seasons it takes to establish financial dominance. Am I being too cynical here, or is this a viable plan? I don't think Russell's alone in thinking along these lines, Kieran, is he?
No, he's not. Certainly under the UEFA rules, and there's actually two types of UEFA rule, one of which could form the basis of a shift as far as the Premier League is concerned in the squad cost ratio, where your wage bill plus your amortization costs plus your agents' fees can be no more than 70% of revenue. But revenue is not the traditional way that we see revenue. It's match day plus broadcast plus commercial, which is fine, the standard, plus your player sale profits. So all of a sudden, that profit centre that we were talking about earlier has further implications, because for every £10 million worth of player sale profit, you can spend £7 million on wages. So there will be implications. Are Chelsea ahead of the game? I think Chelsea don't get enough credit for their player sale success over the course of, I would say, the last sort of 12 to 15 years. It is far in excess of any other club. And also the fact that a lot of those players have come through their academy as well is indicative of the way that the club has organised itself. I think Chelsea deserve credit there. And part of the reason for that is that they've got residential camps, rather than just having an academy. I think a residential camp at Charterhouse School. There's one in Reading, there's one in Guildford. So that's covering, it's not just London, but the home counties as well. It's got soccer schools in the United States. It's got a soccer school in Greece as well, where, again, it's trying to identify talent. And if they see successful players, they'll then go through on a more formal basis to the academy itself. So yes, it is a deliberate strategy. In my view, it's a very successful strategy as far as Chelsea are concerned, and it's a very profitable strategy as far as the accountants are concerned.
Our penultimate question, Kieran, comes from Rick Lewis, who I deduce, and it won't take much deduction because he virtually says so, is American. He's one of our American listeners. We're always keen to hear from our American listeners, and if any of them want to escape over here, we can find safe houses for you. You'll be fine. Over you come. Rick Lewis. I like the sound of Rick Lewis as well, because Rick Lewis starts his question by saying, "This question has no in between." Okay, all right. So everyone, that's a good start to a chapter, that Rick. This because you want to carry on. Read that. So last night I dreamt I went to Amberley again. It's a good question. This question has no in between. It will either be the easiest question ever for Kieran to immediately look up on his spreadsheet, or it'll be so far down the pyramid that it's virtually impossible to answer. That seems to me like a hold my pint moment, Kieran. He's defying you to answer this question. But Rick says, my hometown team played in the third tier of American professional soccer. That was the giveaway, Kieran. That's where I worked out that Rick might be American. My hometown team played in the third tier of American professional soccer. Most players were paid about $200 to $300 a month, with the top players in the league making about $2,000 to $3,000 a month. Based purely then on player compensation, is there any way to determine what league they would fall into in the British football pyramid?
Right, Rick. I would say if we start off in Scotland, I've got the accounts for all the Scottish clubs. The vast majority of them are so small that they don't give wage data. But sort of putting things together, and from discussions with my secret Scottish agent, you're probably looking, players are part-time, certainly at $200 to $300 a month, you're probably looking at Scottish League One, $2,000 to $3,000 a month. You're probably looking at Scottish Championship. Comparing that to England, the lowest wages, I would say, in League Two, you're probably on probably £800 to £1,000 a week. So that's what £4,000 a month. So you're not going to be within the 92. Again, I think you'd have to drop down. The National League is very competitive, so I think you'd probably be looking for those top players, sort of mid-tier, perhaps bottom half of the National League itself, and for the lowest paid players, you would be National League South, and probably one step below. Effectively, and I know, Kevin, these lads who you sometimes play with on a Sunday morning, and I've heard he's on boot money, and what was boot money? Boot money was you were getting £50, £100 a month a match.
I have to say, to my shame, Kieran, I didn't realise there was a third tier of American professional football.
Although professional, I was surprised as well.
Yeah. Although we do have one of our regular guests on who joins us for our monthly club Q&A sessions is involved in American football at a lower level. So perhaps we can ask him for some more details. Now, Kieran, what better way to end a nice, satisfying meal than with an aperitif? Right, now, you don't drink, Kieran, so I mean, obviously, this for you, think of this as a Calvados. We've had a lovely meal. We've had a nice chat. Had some good questions, and we're ending. The waiter's bringing the bill. We think just have a little Calvados for the end. So this for you, Kieran, is a lovely little relaxing way to end the pod with a nice accounting question, and it comes from Robert Curtis. Robert, I wish I hadn't said Calvados. As soon as I stop, I'm not allowed Calvados till the 1st of October. That's my own rule. It's not one of Ali's rules. It's one of my own rules. It's like no one's allowed to mention Christmas until the 1st of October. Robert Curtis says, when a club publishes its retained list at the end of each season, most times there will be a section for players offered a new contract at the expiry of their current deal. As any transfer fee would have been completely amortised, do they then become zero book value players?
The simple answer to your question, Robert, is that you are absolutely correct. When you are amortising a player, it is on the basis of the contract in play at the time. So therefore, if that contract effectively expires at midnight on the 30th of June and then you agree that they're going to carry on, the chances are that the club will have taken that final hit. In theory, they could extend the amortization period by a year, but I suspect in the vast majority of cases they'll choose not to do so if it's done in that last week of June, because in theory you're supposed to amortize on a monthly basis, and therefore the player could then be sold in the same way as an academy player. So if we take the case of Brighton and Tarek Lamptey, I think his contract was due to expire. They gave him a 1-year extension, and then they sold him for £6 million and booked £6 million worth of profit. So that's sort of the way that it's going to work. So you always look at the club's motivations in terms of why have they given an extension to a player and so on.
Okay. Thank you to everyone who has joined the Price of Football Club. If you'd like to join the club too and get every episode a day earlier than everyone else, ad-free listening and invite to our monthly Q&A sessions, bonus episodes and more, then go to our website, which is thepriceoffootball.com. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on X and you can find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy one of our books or a Price of Football t-shirt, you can find all the details on that very same website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Thursday with a news pod. Kieran will have come back from Barnsley by then. You've got a little treat of an away game to Barnsley. I believe you were telling me you've been to Barnsley before as a Brighton fan. When was the last time you said you went?
The first time I went was November 1981. I think it was the third or the fourth. Barnsley had Barnsley was brilliant that time, and I used to, as I was a student, I was a bit of a lefty in those days.
Yeah.
So I had my donkey jacket with NCB stenciled on the back of it, as well as The Cure, which don't often get mentioned in the same sentences. And we went there, and it was a really feisty evening. Barnsley battered us 4-1. And they were absolutely brilliant that night. I think they beat Manchester City, and Swansea beat 3 teams from the old First Division in that season. They had a cracking team. So yes, it's the first time in 44 years that I've been for a Tuesday night in Barnsley.
Barnsley's badge has got a minor on it, Kieran, which is
yes,
it's one of their best badges. But I just love the idea that in 1981, 6'2", lanky streak of southern piss with your donkey jacket with The Cure written on the back, thinking you might get away with looking like an actual real miner, the pale-faced southerner. And you may well have got away with it, Kieran, until you opened your... I say, chaps, where's the local pit? I'm not going to dismiss maybe Shuckle, Kieran, so I'm not even going to bother handing over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell. They all know how to do it now. You can
Can I just remind people, for our listeners in Northern Ireland, 14th of October, Kevin and I, we're doing a live show at Windsor Park, and we're looking forward to it. And also, some of you may have seen that the Premier League is supporting the suicide awareness charity campaigns this year, and we're doing a show in Brighton in November details will be available.
Yes, and we're also planning a date in the Northeast, which I think will now be in the new year, which is somewhere we've always wanted to do the show, so we'll keep you in touch with that. Yes, so we'll see you on Thursday. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.
Listen. That's the sound of the fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. The sound of captivating electric performance, dynamic drive, and the quiet confidence of ultra-smooth handling. The elevated interior reminds you this is more than an EV. This is electric performance redefined. The fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron.